at the last quarter moon. This is a time when people often start to think about what's in balance in their lives versus what's out of balance. And for this reason, balancing practices can be extremely beneficial at the last quarter moon. So, from chakra balancing to elemental balancing to dosha balancing, we are going to be talking tonight all about the last quarter moon and finding balance in your own life. So, merry meet. I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. And like I said, we're here tonight on the last quarter moon talking about how to find more balance. So if you are joining us live, welcome everyone. We have a Q&A at the end like always. You can leave questions and comments in the chat. And also make sure to leave a heart somewhere in the video or a thumbs up, and that way we can get it out to the feed of more people. All right. So I am just going to dive right in, and I see Sonia's here in the chat. Hi. It's so strange to me. It shows me no viewers, nothing, and then if I refresh it, I actually see there are people here. So leave something in the chat so I know that people are here, because it's not showing me an accurate number right now. All right, so I'm going to start by talking a little bit about what the last quarter moon is, and then we will talk about some balancing practices that you can use. And I feel like you can use a combination of these, or you may be drawn to one or more of them. And so hopefully at the end of today's episode, you'll have some tools that you can use to achieve balance. It doesn't just have to be at the last quarter, but this just happens to be a good time of the cycle to do this. So, what is the last quarter moon? The last quarter moon is sometimes referred to as the third quarter moon. It depends on the calendar that you're looking at. On my own watch, it calls it last quarter, but I noticed that on the ephemeris, which I usually look at, it calls it the third quarter. Now, the last quarter moon takes place between days 22 and 23 of the lunar cycle. This is the midpoint between the full moon and the next new moon. Now, during this time, the moon's face will show half in shadows and half in light. And this is a moment in the cycle when many people feel like pausing and reflecting. It's a good time to notice what really isn't serving you in your life. These can be things that you then release before the next new moon, so you don't carry them with you into the next cycle. Now, I think it's also important to mention that when we use the words last quarter moon, it can also refer to the final 7 days of the lunar cycle, which would be the waning crescent moon. Can also sometimes be called last quarter if you're thinking of this as splitting that lunar cycle into 4 equal pieces. Now, it doesn't really matter which one of these definitions we use. It's still a good time for balance. But the particular definition that I'm using tonight is that exact date when we see the moon half in shadows, half in light during the waning half of the cycle. Now, this is a time, like I mentioned, of turning inward, our focus inward, and it's a good time to ask yourself, how balanced am I right now? Now, sometimes we will just feel off. So you may feel like something's just out of sorts. Some of you know that I've been dealing with COVID. I'm on day like 13 right now and still feeling quite sick. So sometimes there's just things about us and our physical bodies and our emotional state and our mental state, and we just know that something's off. And sometimes we're not sure what that is. Sometimes it's an easy answer like me. I know that I'm sick and I know that that's driving some of it. But sometimes we don't know. We just feel off and we're not really sure why. People write to me all the time about this. And so this can be really powerful when we start to consider how we find balance within our lives and then how we don't. Now, tonight, we are going to look at different ways to answer the question, how in balance am I? And we are going to learn that by periodically evaluating our own balance, we are able to more effectively do our magic. So we're going to find that our magic can become amplified. We may find that this helps us with our intuition. It may help us with our self-belief, which is an important component of magic. And we will also feel better in our mundane lives. So we're going to feel like we're better able to direct them. So everybody knows when you're out of balance, you're not as able to direct your life. You're not as able to find the course of your life that you want. So tonight, we're going to talk about several things. We're going to talk about elemental balancing, chakra balancing, dosha balancing, which may be new for a lot of you, but we're going to talk briefly about that. And then we're going to talk about yin-yang balancing. And hopefully what you'll find is that there's one or more methods here that kind of piques your interest, or it's something you think, yeah, I'd like to try that. And I'll give you some ways that you can use that method, okay? Okay, so I am going to start with elemental balancing. So elemental balance, there are 4 elements within us, as most people who are on kind of the witchcraft path realize. And then there is a 5th element that is usually kind of separated out. The spirit element is thought of as the element that kind of gives birth to the other 4 earthly elements. I would say that the spirit element within us is like our soul. It's that part of us that doesn't go away between incarnations, whereas the physical body is then made up of the 4 earthly elements: fire, water, air, and earth. Now, there are different ways for us to look at how to balance the elements within us. So the first thing I'm going to start with is astrological. Now, your astrological elemental balance is pretty easy to determine. You just need to get your astrological chart. Now, if you've never had an astrological chart done before, you can go to astro.com and you can easily get a free chart there. You'll need to know your birth date and time and place. If you don't know those things, it will complicate the process a little bit, so I'd recommend asking someone about your time of birth if you don't know what that is. But let's say, provided that you do have a chart and you're able to access it right now, it's very simple to figure out your astrological balance. So the first thing that you will look at is you're going to look at the different planets and the signs that they're in. Now, any planet that are in signs of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius, those would be considered planets in fire signs. So they would, we tick off a box for the fire element for those, any planets that you have in those signs. If you have planets in Taurus, Virgo, or Capricorn, then those would be considered earth planets. If you have any planets in Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, that would be connected to air. And if you have any planets in Cancer, Pisces, or Scorpio, those would be connected to the water element. Now, generally, when you're trying to figure out the astrological elemental balance of your chart, you want to assign 1 point to every planet except for the sun, the moon, and your rising sign. Now, your rising sign may say AC on your chart. And so those planets, sun, moon, and rising sign or ascendant, are going to get 2 points. Now, the reasoning behind this is that they are more influential on us, which means they should be weighted heavier. Now, generally, we don't count the nodes. So if your chart shows the south or the north node, we generally don't count those. Those aren't planets. They're mathematically calculated places in the chart. So you want to ignore those. They look like little horseshoes. Like one will look like an upright horseshoe and one looks like an upside down horseshoe. So you can ignore that. And then if your chart says the MC on it, you're also going to typically ignore that. Okay, so you're only going to look at your planets, and you'll look at your sun, your moon, and your ascendant. Now, this will create your elemental composition. Now, here's the deal with doing balancing this way. There's not really a lot that we can do about it. It's not like you can change your birth. You can't go back and change your birth, right? Or change your astrological chart. But it does give you a snapshot of where your energy is, where you have more dominant energy versus where you might have less dominant energy. So let's look, I don't have a way to share on the screen when I do these lives to share my own chart, but I'm going to share a bit about my chart with you. So I have a lot of planets in fire signs. I have my sun there, so I would get 2 points for that. I have Mercury, Venus. I'm going to include Chiron because I consider Chiron an important planet in my chart, Saturn, and Neptune. So if I add all of that up, what I will find is that is 7 points. And that is going to be my dominant element, fire. Now, if I then look at air, I only have Pluto there and the moon. The moon gets 2 points, so that's 3. In the earth signs, I only have Jupiter. Planet Jupiter is the only one in an earth sign that gets 1 point. And then for water, I have my ascendant there, so that gets 2. And I also have Uranus and Mars, so that would get me a total of 4. So now if we think about that, that would be a chart that is heavily dominated by the fire element. It has water and air in kind of medium range, and then it's very much lacking in earth. So what do we do about that? Well, like, we can't really change our chart, but that's important information for me to know about. That means I'm fire dominant and I am earth deficient. And so what I have found in my life is that that fire element I really leaned into in my younger days. But what that meant is that I was very imbalanced. I wasn't very grounded. I probably had a perception I was happier back then than I was, but when I look back on it now, I wasn't really as happy as I thought I was. And so what I found is I've gotten older and I've tried to balance this out. I need to bring in more earth-based practices. So I've found a lot of joy in hiking in the mountains, in doing grounding practices, in walking barefoot. So different practices that can bring earth in have been helpful to me. Now, when you look at your own chart, if you notice that you're lacking in fire, or you're lacking in water, or you're lacking in air, or maybe you're like me, you're lacking in earth, then it can be helpful to try to bring in more practices to balance out the places where we're deficient. Now, a lot of times what we'll find, and we're going to find this with many of these other methods of balancing in our lives, is that we will find more balance by bringing in more of the things that we lack, not necessarily bringing down the places where we are dominant. So I'm not necessarily looking to bring down my fire, I'm more looking to bring in more earth. Okay, so everybody's going to have a different experience of this. Of course, you're going to have a different elemental composition, and so hopefully you have your chart and you're able to look at that. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is we are going to talk about another way of looking at elemental balance, and this is through an elemental balancing exercise. Okay, now I can see the chat. My God, I had to press like 20 different buttons, and now I see there are other people here. Amy's here, Tommy, Michelle, Joshua, Joanne is here. Hi, guys. And then I just can't see the bottom of the chat, so I'll just keep refreshing that. Hopefully, eventually, I will be able to. Okay, and as we go too, feel free. I see Jenny's also here. Feel free to share in the chat if you feel that your elements, when we look at them astrologically, if you feel like you're pretty in balance, or if you feel like you have some imbalances. Now, some of you may find that you're really balanced across the board. And if that's the case, good for you. I hope that you feel balanced because astrologically you are, but you may find that some of these other methods then work for you better. So let's talk about an elemental balancing exercise that we can also do. So during this exercise, what you do is you make a list of the different qualities and traits that you have. So if you feel that if you're hardworking, if you feel that you are creative, okay? So you're going to list positive aspects of your personality, but you're also going to list some negative aspects of your personality. And if it's kind of hard to do a reflective exercise like this, you can always ask a trusted friend, like, what do you think are my 5 top positive qualities and my 5 top negative qualities? And then hopefully, you have kind of enough self-confidence in yourself to be able to ask that question and then receive any negative feedback you might get. But a lot of times, we tend to know. I have a lot of patience, but because I am an Aries and I have a lot of fire, sometimes I do get impatient, especially if I am not feeling well. So generally, if we have some good idea about ourselves, we're going to be able to do the exercise ourselves. But don't be afraid to reach out to somebody for a little bit of help. So what you would do next is you're going to try to label those particular traits with an element. And so it may not always be really easy, so you might get stuck on this. What I would recommend people do is try not to get too stuck. Use your intuition. To me, I think of hardworking as earth-based, but somebody might think that it's related to a different element. I think the impatience it tends to be a negative quality of fire. So if you're also struggling with it, what you can do is you can Google positive and negative qualities of the fire element and see what comes up. But what I would recommend is just start with your list and then try to classify them using your own intuition. Okay, so I am going to give you a few ideas. And obviously, there's so many different ways to describe a human being that I can't possibly have all of them on my list, but hopefully this will give you a little idea. And these are some classifications that I did. So I feel when it comes to air, and these are not necessarily mine. These are just overall general qualities I've come up with. So air, I tend to think of that as being creative, but I think the creative could also, we could make a case for that for being water as well, or even fire. I think air as being artistic, intelligent, verbal, flighty, distracted, and even paranoid. So those would be bringing in some of the negative qualities. Earth is strong, strength, endurance, steadfastness, but it also can have some negative qualities like stubbornness, laziness, and it can be kind of domineering. Water, the water energy is adaptable, changeable, compassionate, sensitive, but can also be kind of moody and melancholy, pessimistic, and can become stagnant if there's not enough movement, right? And then the fire element is energetic, motivated, dynamic, but can also become combative, willful, destructive, and even violent. Okay, so these would be qualities, if you hear some of these qualities on the list that you feel belong to you, you can jot those down, but also use your own intuition to try to come up with ways to describe yourself, okay? Now, what you would do afterwards is you would look at this and you would notice, do I tend to have more qualities that are in any one element category? Do I have any qualities? Do I have any elements where I don't really seem to have qualities? Or maybe I only have negative ones. And then from there, we seek to balance, again, just like with the astrological way, we seek to balance by bringing in opposite elements. So fire, when we tend to have too much fire, it can be offset by bringing in more water. Water kind of dampens that fire, right? If we have too much earth, then we can bring in more air and that gets things moving. Earth is very movement focused, whereas earth tends to be more steady, more stable, right? But that's not always the best quality. We don't want to, like, if we have too much earth, it may lead us to lay on the couch too long, right? And not have the motivation that we need. And so we can look to other elements that we're lacking to bring more of those qualities into our lives and therefore achieve more balance. And again, I don't know, I can't see the bottom of the chat. I'm going to keep trying here. But if you feel that there's like a quality of you, an elemental quality based on your characteristics, if you feel you're more dominant in one place or lacking in another place, feel free to put it in the chat. I see Amy said here, she said, I have instant gratification issues. So I would say like something like that would tend to be either fire, maybe air, because sometimes we think of like being kind of scattered and we want everything to be kind of instantly there. But I would say probably either fire or air for that. And then Amy, another Amy, she said she has air, energy, earth, grounded, water, should go with the flow, fire, wisdom, reflect. So she's naming off some of her qualities. And I see Joanna is also here. Hi, Joanna. Good to see everybody. Okay, so that is kind of balancing through the elements. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is dosha balancing. This is something that I talked about a long time ago in an Ask Aislin when I was talking about this same topic, balance. Something I haven't talked about in a while. I do know that in our Shadow Seekers membership, we are going to be studying doshas a little bit later in the year. It might be early next year. But let's talk about what a dosha is. I'm going to give you guys a link where you can take a dosha quiz and you can find out what your dosha is. But this is a way that you can also try to achieve some balance. Now, a dosha is considered a manifested state of being. There are 3 doshas. So where this idea comes from, it comes from Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga. And it is a way that people can manifest health and treat illness in it's an Eastern perspective. But it's not quite the same. It's not like chakra balancing. It's completely different and on its own. So we have these three doshas, which are manifested prakriti. Prakriti is basically like creative energy. So essentially, when things manifest in the earthly plane, prakriti comes down and it fills these things. And so basically everything on earth is made up of this kind of this energy, prakriti. Now, the doshas are composed of combinations of different elements. And so there are three doshas. One is called kapha. Some of you may know what your dosha is, and for others of you, this may be like totally new. So one is kapha. Kapha is a combination of the earth element and the water element. There is pitta, which is a combination of fire and water. And then there is vata, which is a combination of air and ether. And so what's interesting about ether is ether in like a Western perspective, like from a witch's perspective, we would say ether is spirit. It's the fifth element. And so vata is composed of air and ether. Now, most people will find that they are a combination of all three. In fact, most things, living things, are a combination of all of these. But usually we have one or two dominant patterns in our lives. And I'm going to talk about this a bit in a bit. But what I found very interesting when I brought this kind of work into my own coven a couple of years ago when I was studying it, what we found is that people, when they looked at their astrological charts and they figured out where they were dominant in their astrological charts when it came to the elements, and then they learned what their dosha was, there was a lot of overlap. It's really kind of fascinating. And so I recommend, if you've never done doshas at all, if you don't know anything about them, to take this little quiz I'm going to give you and just see what comes up for you, and then kind of compare that to your elemental balance in your astrological chart. It's just an interesting exercise, and many people find that there's some overlap. Now, the doshas do change over time. And so, for example, when people get older, like as we age, we tend to have more vata in us, which is the one that's connected to air and ether. And as when people are younger, like babies especially, have a lot of kapha in them, which is the one that's connected to earth and water. Now, the other thing that is true is that the doshas, there is a different dosha for every season of the year. And as we move into fall, which is where, as we're recording this live, we literally were just at the fall equinox 2 days ago. We're moving into kind of vata season. It's windy, so there's that connection to air. People kind of feel as they move into the fall and then into the winter that their skin kind of dries out. It can be a dry time of year. And so there are ways that we can, if we know what our dosha is and we kind of know the direction that we go as we move seasonally, we can do some practices. A lot of them have to do with the way that we eat and some of the lifestyle practices we have, but we can do that as a way to rebalance ourselves. It's a really fascinating topic. And I mean, you could spend hours and hours and hours just talking about it. So this is just a brief little snapshot, but there's other things that you can kind of look at, like you can look at some of the physical ailments that you have, and then that can also point you towards sort of where you're in or out of balance when it comes to your dosha. So like I mentioned, when a person has like a lot of dry skin or dry hair, that tends to mean that their vata is high. It's higher than usual. And they may experience anxiety as well, because that's a quality of having too much vata. If a person has like a lot of heartburn, then we would usually say that their pitta is high. That's the one connected to the fire element. And those people may notice that they're very impatient and they have more anger. And so what we notice in the summer, that is called pitta season because it's warm at least in the northern hemisphere, right? And what we notice is people get a little bit more angry, a little bit more agitated the hotter it gets. If a person is noticing that they have kind of weight gain that has just sort of come out of nowhere, or maybe it came gradually over time, that can be a sign that their kapha is too high. And so what we do to balance is we bring in opposite elements, opposite doshas. So it's very interesting. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, if I can see the bottom of the chat, which I can't at the moment. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can. Just can't see the bottom of it. So it's when I can't see the bottom of the chat, I can't put my comment in here. Let me try this. Okay, there we go. I had to put it on a new window, but I do have it. And let me just grab this for you. Okay, so if you're live with me, there is a link. Okay, so you can go there and you can take a free dosha quiz if you've never done it before, and you'll learn what yours is. Okay, and then some of this will make a little bit more sense. But what the goal is, for just like it is the goal with kind of elemental balancing or chakra balancing, the goal is to find harmony within ourselves using the elements. So a very interesting idea. And like I mentioned, when we've done this in our coven, many people found that there was an overlap between their astrological elemental composition and their dosha. So take some time at some point, take that quiz. If you're watching back later on YouTube, I'll also have that link right below the video so you can take it too. Okay. I see here in the chat, Michelle was saying, I have the issue of where I overtime things to the point where I have self-doubt. Yeah. So I think, self-doubt is a big one for people. I think if you find a way to just do some overall balancing, some of that starts to go away. But self-doubt tends to be a lack of fire. So I recommend that people who are feeling that they have a lot of self-doubt, and then she said, actually, she corrected herself. She said, I meant overthink. So when I see that, what I think when I see that, somebody who says they're overthinking and then they have a lot of self-doubt, it feels like they have too much air and probably not enough fire. And so then I would recommend you bring in more of the fire element. Now, I think I know, I think you are a fire sun, if I remember correctly. But even though even me, like I have a lot of fire in my chart, but there are times, like if I notice that I'm having a lot of self-doubt, I know that my fire element may be a little bit lower than I'd like it to at that time. But definitely with overthinking, that tends to be too much air. Okay, so yeah, keep the questions coming. It looks like I've got a new page open here where I can see all of the comments now. Awesome. Okay. All right, so let's move on next to chakra balancing. So the chakra balancing, this could be, we could do like episode after episode on this, and in fact I have. And if you want to learn more about chakras, I would say go to our Body Mind Witchcraft YouTube channel. There's multiple videos on the different chakras. If you're in our Shadow Seekers membership, we also have a lot of like more extensive workshops on the chakras. And in fact, we have one coming up on Friday all about the solar plexus, where we will be talking a lot about self-doubt. But I would direct people to like those sources if you want to learn more, but I will talk briefly about it now. So when it comes to chakras, this is another Eastern system of it goes along with the elements and ways that a way that we can balance ourselves. There are three main nadis in the body, and nadis are energy channels. So we have these three channels. We have one channel that goes up right next to the spine, and this one is called the sushumna, and this is our main energetic channel. Now, around the sushumna, we have two other main channels called the Ida and the Pingala. The Ida is connected to feminine energy or yin energy, and the Pingala is connected to masculine energy or yang energy. Now, yang energy tends to be more fiery, and yin energy tends to be more watery. Now, the idea is that we don't want to have any one of these dominant. Now, sometimes there are times in our lives where we need more fire or we need more water, but most of the time we're looking to be in balance. You could see this is the theme of this entire episode, is bringing everything into balance. Now, the Ida and the Pingala, they interweave around the sushumna, and they meet in two different places. They meet at the root chakra, and they meet at the third eye. And this is why when people say, I'm really trying to work on my intuition, I will often say to them, how grounded are you? And it seems like a strange question to ask, but if we're ungrounded, we're going to have some issues with our third eye because we have issues with our root chakra. So that's kind of a brief overview of the three energetic channels. Now, along the sushumna, this is where we have our chakras at regular intervals, starting at the root chakra, which is like at the base of your spine, and going all the way up to the crown chakra, which some say is right on the top of your head, on the physical top of the head, and others say it's a little bit above your head, kind of in your aura. Now, the idea with the chakras is that they're not really ever fully open and fully closed. Like sometimes people say my chakras are completely closed or they're completely blocked, and that's not really what happens. The energy is always moving through your body, but sometimes in certain chakras we have we might say that the chakras have blockages in them, which means it's like a stream of water that's been narrowed a bit. So the energy is still going through the area, it's just not going through in the most effective way. So when we are seeking to balance ourselves through chakra balancing, we're seeking to look at each of those 7 chakras and notice where the blockages are. And one of the best things that you can do is to look at qualities you have in your life, and not only like emotional and mental, but also physical. So, for example, if a person has a lot of fear, let's say they're just in kind of a state of fear a lot of the time, then I would say that that person needs to get more grounded, and I would recommend they start to work on their root. Now, if you're somebody who's been working on your chakras, I do want to normalize this. It's common. I've been working on mine. I started studying chakras over 25 years ago, and it's like a lifetime process of work. It's to me, the chakra system is a barometer that's telling you where you're in balance and when you're not in balance. So it's not something like, oh, I did chakras, I'm over that. It's something that you are constantly, if you want to find balance this way, it's something that you would be constantly working on, and you would be noticing what parts seem to be in and out and which chakras we should be working on at that time because of that. Like if a person had a lot of self-doubt, then I would direct them to their solar plexus. And if they strengthen the solar plexus, they're going to strengthen their self-belief. If a person is having issues with relationships, I would usually direct them to the heart chakra and probably also to the sacral chakra. If a person is having, let's talk about like some physical things too. A person's having digestive issues, I would direct them to the solar plexus. Now, a lot of it is sort of self-explanatory. So if you think about your body and you think about where you're having ailments, that will direct you kind of towards the chakra that's nearest to that. So somebody who's having, like, let's say we're having like shoulder tension, right? Then, or some issues with the arms, that's going to be connected to the heart. If we're having neck issues, right? Sore throats, hoarse voice, that's going to bring us to the throat chakra. Headaches can be connected to the throat, but also to the third eye and to the crown. And so you use this as a barometer to figure out how imbalanced you are, and then to direct you towards which chakra, which will help you balance that issue and therefore bring you back into alignment. Now, what I recommend, especially if somebody's brand new to the chakras, is I would just kind of do like an overview of all the chakras. So you can go to our Body, Mind, Witchcraft channel, and we have YouTube channel, and we have videos on all of the chakras except for the crown, because the crown tends to become balanced when you balance everything below it. And then if you're in our Shadow Seekers membership, go check out our videos, our workshops, because those go into much more depth than the YouTube channel does. Now, the chakras are also tied to elements, at least some of them are. The root is tied to earth, the sacral chakra is tied to water, the solar plexus is tied to fire, the heart is tied to air, and then the throat chakra is tied to the 5th element, ether, or we might call it spirit from a witchcraft perspective. And then generally, there's not really an element for the third eye or the crown. Okay, so that is chakra balancing, and it can always be interesting to kind of think to yourself where, which chakra are you going to be working on right now? You can feel free to put that in the chat too if you know. I see Sabrina is also here. Merry meet. Okay, so now I'm going to talk kind of briefly about yin-yang balancing and then we'll just talk a little bit kind of overall about just the idea of balance, and then we'll move into the Q&A. So yin yang balance is like an additional thing that you can do. This is also an Eastern practice, and I already mentioned a bit about the Sushumna and the Ida, the Ida and the Pingala, the masculine and the feminine channels of the body. Now, there's yin and yang energy within all of us. It has no bearing on your gender whatsoever. We all are composed of yin and yang energy. And the idea is to find balance. So some of you have probably seen the yin yang sign. And by the way, we often will say yin and yin yang in like American English, but the pronunciation of a in Sanskrit is ah. So yin and yang would actually be the proper way to pronounce it. Now, some of you may have, I'm sure many of you have seen the yin yang symbol, right? And it has the black part with some white in it and the white half with the black part in it. And what it shows us is that within each side, even within yang, there's yin energy. And within yin, there's yang energy. So we're always trying to find this balance. Now, when you want to go to sleep, you want more yin energy. You don't want to be fired up, right? But if you have a big paper to write, or you have a presentation to do, or you're getting motivated to go to work, we need some yang energy. We can't be sleeping at our desk. That's too yin, right? So some of it's very simple to think about. What parts of my life do I need yin versus what parts of my life do I need yang? But the reality is that we are fluctuating through these energies throughout our day. And we all have both of these energies within us. Now, if you have too much yang, then you bring in more yin. And if you have too much yin, then you bring in more yang. And there's many different ways to bring in more of this energy. It can be as simple as just the things that you do, like physical activities. So for example, someone who needs, so let's say somebody's really keyed up with anxiety and they've got a lot of fears and they're just not feeling good in their skin, right? I know I carry a lot of anxiety, and so sometimes it feels like you just want to you're just not even comfortable in your own skin because of the way you're feeling. And so when we have that kind of energy, that is an excess of yang energy. And so we want to bring in more yin practices, which are going to calm down the system. So I would recommend doing calming breath work, doing yin yoga. That's where the word comes from. It's yoga that's meant to bring in more yin energy. It doesn't look like traditional yoga that we often think about. It's like lying or sitting in very relaxing poses and just letting the body relax and open up. And oftentimes it will release some stuff too. Now, if on the other hand, a person is feeling really sluggish, really sedentary, not really having the motivation to get off the couch, maybe they have a lot of ideas and plans, but they just don't have the way to put them into motion, then that person needs some more yang energy. And so I would recommend that person do more activating breath work, do more activating yoga practice, or go take a hike or take a walk or take a jog or calisthenics or aerobics or whatever it is that gets you moving, dancing. Just get moving, and you will often find that will recalibrate your energy. It can often be as simple as that. So we really want to be mindful overall of our energy. Another thing that you can do if you just want to balance the yin and yang channels, the Ida and the Pingala, you can do Nadi Shodhana breathing. Now, Nadi Shodhana breathing is alternate nostril breathing, and I can't remember if I showed this last week, so there's some overlap with this episode and last week's episode because we're talking about Mabon, and balance is a big theme then as well. Now, when we do Nadi Shodhana breathing, you will breathe in one nostril, and then you'll exhale through the opposite nostril and then breathe in through that one, and you basically go back and forth. So I usually take my thumb, place it on the right nostril, inhale through the left, close off the left. I usually do it with my ring finger, close off the left, open up the right, and then exhale through the right. And then you'll inhale through the right, close off the right, and then exhale through the left. And you just go back and forth, back and forth. And that alone, that very, very simple practice alone can help to balance those two energetic channels of the body and may leave you feeling much, much better. Now, another thing with this type of breath, though, is that if you want to bring in more of one of those or the other of those energies, you can do single nostril breathing. So if you want to bring in more yin energy, you can breathe in and out through the left nostril. So you would just close off the right and you would sit, you would breathe in and out through the left nostril. If you're someone who's having trouble sleeping, calming down, relaxing, I recommend trying left nostril breathing and see if that helps, because it really can bring down the system and bring in more of that yin energy. Now, if on the other hand, you need some more activating energy, you're falling asleep at work or school or something like that, and you just need, or you need some motivation, then you can just breathe in and out through the right nostril. That will activate the yang channel, and then you may feel like a pick-me-up. So it can be really interesting to not only use this just for balancing both sides, but to use it when you need to bring in more of one of the two different energies. And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about, I did talk about this last week, is just sort of like lifestyle balancing. It's really important to think about where we spend our time. Do you spend a lot of your time with things that deplete you, around people that you don't like very much? There's only so much we can do. We have to go to work, and maybe we don't like who we work with. So that becomes more important then to bring in balancing practices if there's a portion of our life that we're not really happy with. It's important for us to then try to find other areas to be happy with. But we really want to think about, how do we spend our time? Do you like the way you spend your time, or do you not like the way you spend your time? Where in your life do you think you could find more free time versus, what kinds of things could you give up, right? One of the things that I noticed, and I talked about this last week as well, is that I believe that there were some things out of balance in my own life, which led to me getting COVID, and then having COVID really derail me. It really took a lot out of me to be like 2 weeks in and still not feeling very good. It is big, right? But I've been forced to change the way I portion out my time. I can't work as much as I was able to 2 weeks ago. I have no choice, right? So what that's made me do is more yin-like things. I'm laying on the couch. I got a video game. I've been playing that. I'm really enjoying that. And so now when I think about what will happen, as I heal, as I move back into my normal life, I need to figure out how to bring more of that into my everyday life so I do find more balance, right? So, this is going to be different for everybody, but, really think about your relationships you have with friends, with loved ones, with family members, with partners, right? Your children. Think about work, like, play and work balance. Think about learning. Like, do you feel engaged? Are you learning something new? Because that can be important too. We can feel stuck and stagnant when we're not learning anything. How about your health, right? And that health can be physical, but it can also be your emotional, your mental, and your spiritual health. Like, where do you spend time on those things? So the point of this is not to overwhelm you and be like, oh my God, these are all the places that I'm not doing good enough. But it's just to make you reflect on it, right? Where can I find just a little bit more balance? Just a little bit more balance is all that we really need to have a profound effect on our lives. So, for your consideration, what we notice when we look at all of these different systems and ways of finding balance is that it tends to be, even though these methods are different, what we find is that to bring ourselves into balance, we figure out where we're in excess. We look at the opposite of that and we try to bring in more of that opposite thing. And so we see that time and time and time again. And for me, when I look at like multiple different systems and I'm trying to find truth and reality in reality, right? I like to look at the overlap between different systems, because to me, the overlap is where the real truth lies. And again, time and time again, when we look at these different systems, we notice it's all kind of about elements and about, bringing in, kind of balancing by bringing in the opposite of the place that we're out of balance. So overall, when you take the time to periodically do this kind of work, which, like I said, it's the third quarter or the last quarter moon, always a great time to do it. here at Mabon season, perfect time to do it. Even like at twilight, like the space right between day and nightfall, that's another good time to just kind of ask yourself for a moment, how balanced do I feel in this moment? During these transition spaces, this is where we are often directed inward to look at balance. But when we do make the effort, take the time to do kind of regular balancing practices, we find that it increases our intuition. We find that it increases our self-belief. We find more favorable outcomes with our magic. So when people say like my spells aren't working, I'm feeling like, I'm just feeling off about all this. Oftentimes this is the answer. It's not about like, oh, read more about spells or do the spells again. It's like, figure out, are you in balance? What's out of balance? Because something in your energetic field may be what's causing your spells to be perceived as not working. And then overall, we also are going to be better at directing the course of our mundane lives as well. So I hope that that helps, and I hope that you're able to take some of this with you, and if anything, just it plants that little seed in your mind about kind of periodically asking myself, am I in balance? Okay, so I am going to move into the Q&A now. I'm going to look at the chat here for a moment, okay? And I see more people joining us. Hi, everybody. I see some people talking about some chakras in here too. I see Amy said she needs to work on her solar plexus and her fire because she has digestive issues. Yeah, I do too, and so for me, kind of working on that solar plexus has been a big game changer. One simple thing to do for your solar plexus is to take a probiotic. It sounds like, what would that have to do with energy? But there's such an intermarriage between our energetic body and our physical body. And so what we do for our physical is going to have an impact on our energetic body, and vice versa. What we do in our energetic body, if we're kind of working with the chakras, we'll also find that our physical conditions improve as well. Colleen says she's been having digestive issues for a long time. She said, I've been so focused on the root, but it seems I need to look at the sacral chakra. Yeah, so the sacral chakra is digestive, but especially the solar plexus as well. And the thing is too, is you can focus on one chakra for a while and then kind of direct your attention to a different one, and then you can come back to the root. I always think there's a large connection between the lower three, the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus. If you have kind of areas of dis-ease in one of those, you probably want to work on all three anyways. You can just kind of go rotate back and forth. For me, what I will generally do is I check my body. I'm like, where am I feeling where's most of my physical pain right now? What kind of physical ailments am I having? And then I allow that to direct me towards which chakra to focus on for the next week or 2 weeks or maybe next lunar cycle, and then recheck in at the start of the next cycle and then say, well, have I improved that area? Am I ready to move from that chakra onto a different chakra? And then I can always come back to the one I was working on. Mary Mead, I see Tracy's in the chat. Hi. And Sonia said a probiotic is amazing for her. Yeah, I mean it can be a big deal. It was for me too. It was something that I never really thought much about, and then I started working with these naturopaths. It was something that was always coming up, and it's always coming up in like chakra work. Oh, you should take a probiotic to help with your solar plexus. But then I started working with these naturopathic doctors, and they say that everybody should be on a probiotic. I know that they're not cheap. In order to get good ones, they're not necessarily cheap, but they can be it can be a big game changer for people. Their rationale is that the food quality isn't quite the same as it was even 50 years ago. And we have very fast lifestyles. We eat a lot of fast food. We eat a lot of processed food, even those of us who try to eat healthy. And just an overall probiotic can be a big deal. Joanne said she came up as kapha dosha, and she said water is her primary element. And then she said she's always feeling out of balance. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, first of all, I think it's interesting. Kapha is related to water, and then you said water is a primary element for you. So a lot of people will find a lot of overlap between those. One of the things to, think about if you're always feeling out of balance is spend some time studying the chakras. That's what I would do. Spend some time kind of really looking at the elemental composition in you, sort of like me, what I shared with having all that fire energy and really needing to force myself to do grounding so that I could offset that, that fire that was kind of out of balance. And I think if you find one of these systems you like, you will probably you'll probably find that you'll become more in balance over time. And then Jenny said kombucha helps with digestive issues too, and I love kombucha. It's heartbreaking to me how expensive it is. I remember even a few years ago, it was like only a couple dollars for a bottle, and now it's like $4 or $5 just for a small bottle. But it can be so good for the digestive system. I try to splurge on a couple bottles every shopping trip. Not the way I used to be able to when it was a little cheaper, but it's a big deal for digestive. Tracy said, how best to get to a chakra with depression? So, okay, so if depression is something that you are feeling, I would work on the root chakra and the sacral chakra, probably the most, but I'd also throw in the solar plexus because the solar plexus, kind of those bottom three, are very good for helping with depression. And so what I would generally do is I would probably start with the root, kind of work with the root chakra, work with it for a couple of weeks, or kind of dedicate a cycle to just working with the root. And then I would go to sacral chakra. So your root is sort of like the physical body, so that can help with some of the physical parts of depression. And also we know that depression can sometimes be too much earth element. And almost sometimes like too much earth or the water and the earth element are kind of out of balance. And what is too much water and too much earth just makes mud, right? And that can feel like what depression is like. It's like it's kind of muddy, right? Your mind feels muddy, your emotions feel muddy. And so if you work with your root and your sacral chakra and then spend a cycle maybe working on your solar plexus, you might feel after those 3 cycles that your depression is feeling a little bit better. Okay. Okay, so I've got a couple of questions that were left for me on the post. So I'm gonna go through a few of these, and then that gives you guys a little bit of space if anybody's got any other questions they want to put in the chat. Hopefully I haven't missed anything. I do see that Sabrina says she loves twilight because she can relax more on her porch. Yeah, it can be a very relaxing time of the day. The veil's thin just ever so slightly at those transition spaces between day and night, and people will often feel more relaxed at that time. But sometimes people feel more agitated, right? And, if that's the case, then I would look at, kind of what about it is making people feel agitated at any certain time of the day. Is it emotional? Is it mental? But overall, twilight is a time that a lot of people feel more at ease. Okay, so I have a question here from Andrea. Andrea said, I'm a novice witch, and some spells and rituals I follow the instructions step by step, but many of them I follow my intuition and I follow what feels right to me. So my question in your experience is, do you think spells and rituals are as effective that way? So I think this is a really important question, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this one. So I have some thoughts on this. I'm a real proponent of intuitive magic. I think that I feel personally that we surrender a lot of our own abilities over to other people that we perceive to be experts because we don't trust ourselves. So I would often direct a person to be working on the solar plexus if you have a case like that where I'm like not really trusting myself, because that will really strengthen your self-belief. But just in general, as a species, we just hand over a lot of our power to to people who we perceive as experts. So I always tell people, if you go to a doctor and they tell you something that doesn't seem right, you don't have to believe that thing, right? You can go and get another opinion. I've had some incredible um, things said to me that turned out to not be true from a doctor that I trusted even. And I was able to get a second opinion, and thank God I did, because it was life changing. So I think that, from the perspective of witchcraft, the same thing happens. I think it's important for us to read books, become knowledgeable, study spell work, study the craft, study ourselves. I think one of the best things we can do as witches to make our magic even more potent is to just do our inner work, right? Make sure that we are feeling healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. But intuitive magic, to me, is a way that witches really can grow and step into their power. So when I was first starting out, I didn't trust myself either. I would just read what was in the books. I'd be afraid to change anything. Oh, I don't have that ingredient. I can't get that ingredient. And I'd be afraid that it wasn't going to work. And then I kind of moved through that and out of that, and I realized that we can absolutely do substitutions in many spells, and our intuition is often the best guide that we have. If you read a bunch of spells and they don't resonate with you, always feel free to make up your own spell. I personally, in my personal opinion, I think that sometimes that is the most powerful kind of magic, is the magic that comes from within. It comes from the heart. It comes from the intuition. And so I absolutely believe that those rituals you're referring to, the ones that you've kind of used your own intuition with, I absolutely believe they're just as effective, if not more effective, than the ones that we can read about in the books. Now, the one thing I would say that might not fall into this category is ceremonial or high magic. It's a special type of magic that is meant to be done step by step. The way that we say the words is important. The ingredients are important. So that type of magic, I do think that it needs to be followed step by step. I'm personally not a practitioner of high magic, but those people that I know who do practice that will agree with me. That kind of magic needs to be kind of followed, or you might alter the outcome. But when it comes to the majority of magic that witches are doing, I do think feel free to use your intuition. I hope that helps. Now, I have these two questions. There's a question from Lori and one from Candy, and they're kind of related, so I'm going to put them together and answer them together, okay? So Lori said that she just tried shadow work, and she said it kicked her butt, and it's continuing to do so. She said she found out some root issues that were causing problems, and she said, how do I overcome this intense pain? And then Candy, she said, can shadow work do damage to my psyche? Okay, so I'm going to kind of answer both of these together because I think there's going to be some overlap with the two questions. So let's kind of start with what Lori said. She said, she's done some shadow work. So first of all, congratulations on finding some root issues. That isn't easy to do. So you should definitely congratulate yourself on doing some good work. But then, she brings up this good point about the intense pain, and I think that's kind of why Candy asked the question she does about, can shadow work cause damage to my psyche? Because people are sort of worried about, like, it's one of those things. Sometimes shadow work will it'll feel worse before it gets better. But this is something that is often true in our own healing as we go through the darkness. Sometimes the things we do, dredging up the past, facing our shadow aspects. Remember, they're shadow aspects for a reason. It's because our psyche didn't think we were strong enough to face them. That's why they've been hidden. It's why we're being protected from them. But the problem is we can say thank you. Our ego kind of comes in, puts on that mask in an effort to protect us and kind of show the face to the world that we think everybody wants to see. But in the end, it ends up causing us problems because we have that kind of intense sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a conflict within us because we want to be whole, and yet there's parts of us we can't face, or there's parts of us that we have to reject, or there's aspects of our past that are still have these deep holds on us, and so I believe that we will have to face some of this, so there can be some pain that comes up in the beginning as we begin to face certain shadow aspects. Now, what I recommend doing is to try to have releasing rituals built into your practice. You're lucky because right now we're very close. We are 1 week away from the dark moon, which means that this next 7 days is an awesome time to let go of stuff. So if there's pain that's coming up, pain isn't something we need to hold on to. We need to acknowledge our shadow aspects. We kind of need to acknowledge where things come from if we want to become whole, but we don't need to carry all of that pain. And so during the dark moon or the waning half of the cycle, or especially the waning crescent, these last 7 days of the cycle, you can do rituals to let go of some of that pain. Whether that pain is physical or it's probably more emotional you're talking about, but just like making an effort, saying to yourself, I'm ready to release some of this pain. I'm happy that I acknowledge this. I'm happy that I faced this and found root causes, and now I'm ready to let go of it. And you may find that you do that once and maybe it helps a little bit. And then you do it the next cycle and it helps even more. And then the next cycle it helps even more. And eventually it becomes part of your practice. So for me, I'm letting go of some of that every single dark moon. And that is what I feel is responsible for making me the way that I am, more balanced, more at ease with myself. Now, what Candy was saying about can it do damage to my psyche? No, I don't think that we have to fear that. I think that it's sort of like when people fear Kundalini and energy work. They've heard stories about people went crazy when they did it or something like that. Will it dredge up stuff? Yes, of course. That's this type of work will dredge up stuff from your past. It will probably feel worse before it feels better. But will it damage your psyche? In fact, it's supposed to do the exact opposite. It's supposed to integrate all the parts of you. It's supposed to heal your psyche over time. Now, what I would mention is that anybody who's kind of feeling like it's bringing up a lot, and especially if it brings up more than you feel you can manage, then don't be afraid to reach out. I recommend having a therapist on call. It doesn't have to be somebody versed in shadow work. Just having somebody to talk to as this stuff is coming up can be highly important, or a trusted friend or a group. This is why I started Shadow Seekers in the first place, was so that people had a place to go to while they were doing this kind of work, so you don't have to be alone. But if you're not in our Shadow Seekers membership, I know that neither of you guys are, you can consider joining us the next round. Or, you're here in Body, Mind, Witchcraft. This group also has good resources, and there's people here you can reach out to and just share, what's going on with you, so you have somebody listen. And sometimes that's really the thing that we need the most. We just need somebody to listen to us, to validate it, so it's not just us carrying it all ourselves, right? So I hope that helps. You can also check out our Body, Mind, Witchcraft YouTube channel. There's a lot of videos on shadow work. I'm pretty sure I'm going to do another one next week for the dark moon, and we'll be talking more about shadow work then. But I hope that helps in the meantime. Okay, I'm going to go back to the chat and see if there's anything else. Sabrina said, thanks for the reminder of the dark moon. Yep, the dark moon is on Tuesday. If you are in our Shadow Seekers membership, we are doing an awesome dark moon ritual with Persephone that night, this reminds me that I haven't fully decided yet, but it's going to affect us doing this Ask Aislin, because our ritual is going to be at the same time I usually do Ask Aislin on Tuesdays. I always try to time our Shadow Seekers dark moon rituals to the exact moment of the dark moon. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the episode an hour and a half early. So I'll do the episode from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific next week. And then the following week we'll be back at our normal time, 5:30 p.m. But that way I can do both things. And saying hi, Anthony has joined us in the chat as well. Hello, good to see you. Let's see. Okay, I don't really see any other questions. So I'm going to, I see, Joshua said he started yin yoga and gentle yoga to start. And he noticed quite a difference in different things, especially focus. Yeah, it can be, yin yoga is one of my favorite types of yoga. It's so good for opening up the body and releasing things. This is a great time of the lunar cycle to be doing yin yoga. Many times people will they relax enough into the poses, they start to let go of emotional pain. Some people will start to cry, to weep. You don't even have to know why. It's just like an outlet of letting go of energy that we're carrying. So it can be so good for us. Okay, well, I am going to sign off, but look for next week. I think the time change will be 4 p.m. Pacific, and we'll be talking about shadow work and the dark moon. And then those of you who are Shadow Seekers members can follow that up at 5:30 p.m. Pacific next Tuesday for our dark moon ritual. And I think that's all I have to talk about tonight. So I'm going to sign off for now. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your evening. If you are leave a heart or a thumbs up somewhere in the video. It will help us get this into the feed of other people. If you're watching back in replay, you can leave questions and comments too. I go back later and I answer everything and respond to everybody. And if you are watching back on YouTube later or you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure that you subscribe, and that way you won't miss a single episode. That channel is Body, Mind, Witchcraft. All right, until next time, blessed.